try to talk about now is PIN synchronization between CallManager and Unity Connection. At the end of my lecture here, if you want kind of like a lab guide of sorts on how to kind of configure this with step-by-step instructions, I also have that available as well. Okay, so
Okay.
yeah, so let's go ahead and configure this stuff, shall we? The first thing that I want to kind of show you guys between the synchronization between CallManager and Unity Connection is I have two kind of servers that I have connected to in my tabs here. I got CallManager, which I'm connected to, and I have Unity Connection that has been integrated to work with CallManager here. And just to give you some background information before we go into actually enabling the PIN synchronization, I want to kind of show you guys what is turned on my system, just so that you guys can have a better idea of what's been configured and what hasn't been configured. Okay. So I'll log into CallManager first, and I want to look at control centers, features, and services. And I just want to show you guys what services I have turned on for the system. Now, the way that PIN synchronization works is that we're going to be using some type of an Axel web user. So we're going to have to create a user that has access to the Axel web service, right? So that's kind of why I want to go to this particular service to begin with. And you'll see that when this thing loads up, I have a couple services turned on. I have the CallManager service so that I can, provide for call processing and all that. I have the Cisco TFTP service, which allows me to push configuration to my configured endpoints so that they can register and whatnot. Okay. Now, for what I think this is going to require is that, see this Cisco Axel web service? I'm going to want to activate this bad boy so that I can get some AXL functionality. Because that's really the communication that's going to go between CallManager and Unity Connection. So what's going to happen is I'm going to go back to CallManager here. And now that you know what kind of services are turned on, what I need to do here is I need to start to create a user in CallManager so that I can import them over to Unity Connection and then start the PIN synchronization process. So in order to do that, I'm just going to create a quick end user. And for the purposes of this discussion, I want to let you know that we'll be kind of messing with two different types of users for this session. The first type of user that we're going to deal with is an end user. This user is typically associated with some kind of telephone, right? So we typically know that. Now, there's another type of user here that can be created for like an admin account. Or these application type users can be kind of like third-party users. So think of like a third-party application, like something like Unity Connection, where I may have to reference some type of administrator login so that they can attempt to touch CallManager and go into CallManager's database. Okay, so two different types of users here that we'll be working with. Okay, I'm going to deal with the first type of user first. I'm going to talk about the end user. And here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an end user just so that you can see that I'm doing all this by hand, right? So I'm going to create a BeingWin account. I'm going to put a password that we are probably not going to have to use this week. But and I don't want to put a PIN just yet, but I want to put in a last name for sure because that's required of me. And I might as well just put in my first name as well. Now, standard end user configuration, what I would probably want to do is give them some privileges. So the privileges that I want to give this particular user is I want to give them access to standard CUCM end users so that they can access this, end user interface, change their speed dials, subscribe to IP phone services. So that's a pretty common thing to give to an end user. Another thing, another access control group that's very common to give it to an end user is a standard CTI enable. This allows the end user to essentially control their desk phone from some other kind of device, like an application of sorts, like Jabber. Okay, so these two access control groups are very common to give to an end user. Now, as soon as I save this, you'll notice that they'll automatically have roles associated with them. Okay, so again, this is pretty standard for right now. And then the next thing that I want to do is I want to associate this user to a phone, which I haven't created yet. So to create this phone, I'm going to create a 7962 phone. And I want to associate this phone to this end user. And again, it doesn't really matter that we register this phone, but we do need to associate it to the end user. That's key for doing this import, okay? So I'm going to specify a couple of things here, like the phone button template, the MAC address. Again, I'm not really going to register this phone, so it really doesn't matter what I put in here. But I do want to start making these associations. Why? Because if I'm going to be doing anything like importing a user from CallManager to Unity Connection, I do need to make these associations for this to work, okay? So device security profile, I'm going to select this non-secure profile because we don't care about encryption here, okay? So after this phone's been created, I'm going to create a DN that this person's going to belong to. And I'm going to go back to my end user. And now I'm going to associate that phone to the end user. So in order to do that, I'm going to go under the device information, under the control devices. And I want to select device association here. Okay. Now, you'll notice that if I associate this physical phone to my end user account, all I have to do is check mark it. And I have to save select. Okay, and then if I go back to the user, you'll notice that the MAC address kind of shows up here. Okay, now in order for me to do this kind of like import between CallManager and Unity Connection, one thing that I'm going to show you is sometimes you got to make more than one association. You'll notice that because I've associated this person to this phone, you would expect that there would be an automatic association with whatever primary extension that was kind of configured on that phone, but that's not automatic all the time. So here's kind of what I want to show you, right? Is if this is saved and I don't have the primary extension, sometimes this import may not work. If you go to Cisco Unity Connection, and in Cisco Unity Connection, if I want to do this import of my user, the easiest way to do things is to go to telephony integrations, and I'm going to click on phone system here. From your phone systems, I want to go ahead and click on edit, and I want to go to the CallManager Axle Web Servers. Okay, now here, I'm going to want to add a new Axle Web Server, and that new Axle Web Server is going to be CallManager. And that is my CallManager IP address, if you can't see that right here, right? So CallManager is going to be referenced here to 10.1.5.15. I'm going to use a port of 8.4.4.3. And the username and password that I'm going to use is the CUCM admin account, which is technically an admin account that I have created here already. And this is just my basic administrative account. That's the account that I'm using to log into CallManager, by the way. Okay. So I'm going to use that same admin account to reach into CallManager's database so that we can start to synchronize data. Okay. Now, you can save this if you want. If we wanted to really see if this worked, we could test this stuff. But hey, yeah, the test works. Looks like I can successfully send this Axle message to CallManager. Axle stands for Administrative XML layer, right? And it's just a communication between, two different systems. So what I can do at this point in time is I can go to import users, and from import users, I can select my phone system. And from this phone system, if you click find, you'd expect, oh yeah, I'd be able to find my user here, right? But here's the thing, when you're importing users into Unity Connection, they have to have an association to the primary extension. And the fact that I don't find anybody here is because in CallManager, if you look at the end user and you look at that BeamWin account, you'll notice I don't have that primary extension. That's why nobody kind of shows up, right? But as soon as you go in here and you make this association based on that control device that you have, okay, And then if you go back to Unity Connection and then you press the find button the second time, you should be able to see that person show up. Okay, so again, sometimes it's a good idea just to make as many of these associations as possible so that when you are doing more advanced kind of like configuration, this stuff will show up properly, right? So that's kind of why I wanted to show you that. Now, if I can import this user into my system, that'd be great. So let's import selected here. And I'm going to wait for this successful integration here. So I've imported this user successfully. If I go to users, I should be able to see my Beam 1 account. Okay, no problems. Now that I have the user in both systems, the next thing that I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to exchange my Tomcat Trust certificate between these two servers. Okay. So in order to do that, I'm going to go to the OS administration for both systems. And while this thing logs in, I'm going to go to CallManager. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go to OS administration. I'm going to log in with my admin account. And going back to Unity Connection, what I want to do is I want to go to Security and go to Certificate Management. That's where your Tomcat Trust certificate is going to be held at. Okay, same thing goes with CallManager. If I go to Security, Certificate Management, and I click Find, I should be able to find all of my certificates here. Okay, now let me be honest with you guys. Typically, when you start exchanging these certificates, what's required is that you guys kind of reboot the servers. And I'm not going to want you guys to wait around to see that. So I've already exchanged these certificates, but I kind of want to show you guys how this would look like if you haven't ever done this before, right? So in CallManager, what you end up seeing is, notice how there's a bunch of Tomcat Trust type certificates located towards the bottom here of the list. So there is a Tomcat Trust for IAM and Presence. There's one for Cisco Unity Connection. There's one for subscriber and publisher and IAM and Presence. There's more from VeriSign stuff. The idea here is let's just pretend that this isn't there. Okay, let's just pretend that that hasn't been uploaded. If that were the case, the thing that I need to do, if I'm on CallManager right now, is I want to download my CallManager Tomcat Trust certificate. So if you take a look at some of the Tomcat Trust certificates, right, I've named things so that this should make sense for some people. But this is my Tomcat Trust certificate for my publisher, which is a server that I'm currently on. What I want to do is I want to take this and I want to click on it. And I want to download this .pem file so that I can download this certificate, okay? Eventually, what I'm going to do is after I download this thing and I save it, I should be able to take this document and upload it into the Unity Connection server, okay? So that's kind of how you do that. So I've downloaded the certificate here. I'd have to go over to Unity Connection and do the exact same thing. If you take a look at Unity's stuff, they have a bunch of Tomcat Trust certificates here. I want to take Unity Connection's Tomcat Trust certificate. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to download that .pem file. Okay. So now I've downloaded both CallManager's and Unity Connection's Tomcat Trust certificate. Okay. So as soon as you downloaded and you've saved both of these files, the idea here is, again, we've already done this before, but you know, the idea here would be, okay, now I want to upload the certificate. So if I'm on Unity Connection, what I would do is I would select the certificate type and I would select Tomcat Trust certificate. I'd give it a friendly name, and I've already uploaded this, but I would give a friendly name of like CUCM. And I would browse through my files here, and I would be able to specify like my publisher Tomcat Trust certificate, right? Because that's the one that I want to upload to Cisco Unity Connection. And then you press the upload button, okay? You would then go ahead and do the same thing to CallManager. So in CallManager, I would press upload certificate. I'd select the Tomcat Trust. And give it a friendly name. In this case, I could name it something like Unity. and then I would find the upload file for Cisco Unity Connection here. Okay, again, I'm not going to do this because I've already done this already yesterday. Okay, and typically once you exchange these two certificates, what you would then have to do is reboot these two servers. And that's why I already did this for you, and I don't want to do this again, right? So I did this yesterday, and then I basically rebooted the system. After you've done that, now you're going to finally, I guess, enable that PIN synchronization between these two servers. So in CallManager, I'm going to get back to CallManager administration. I'm going to do the same thing for Unity Connection. I'm going to get to Unity Connection administration. Okay. And in both systems, I want to log in again. And the first thing that I want to do is, I guess first and foremost, I want to create an application user inside of CallManager that can have access to that Axle API access. So I'm going to show you what my user management looks like inside of my application user. I'm going to just select CUCM because it's already there. But if you take a look at the CUCM admin user, you'll notice that there's a role here that's associated to this person. And that role happens to be the standard Axle API access role, okay? The reason why I have that is because I basically was given the privilege of the standard CCM super users, which essentially gives me access to all parts of the system, including the standard Axle API access. So that's one of the things that I can do here. If you want to create your own end user, all you would have to do is give an access control group that has access to this specific role, and they would be able to do the same function. But at least one application user must have access to this particular role for this option to work. Okay? Now that we know what option we have, I want you guys to be able to go to Unity Connection. And inside of Unity Connection, you'll notice that under the phone systems, I will be able to look at my Axle servers, the same place that I went to kind of do the integration or importing of my end user. You'll notice I'm using that CUCM admin account to touch CallManager's database. And you'll notice that here you have a check mark for enabling end users for PIN synchronization. You need to check mark that, okay? Now, you're almost finished here. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to CallManager. And in CallManager, you need to add an application server. So go to System, and then you're going to go click on Application Server. And you'll notice there's no kind of application server here. So I'm going to just delete this one really quick, just to pretend that that wasn't there. What I would need to do is I click Add New. And I would select a Cisco Unity Connection server. And in this particular case, I would give it a friendly name like Unity. And I'd give the IP address of my Unity Connection server. And I would put the selected application user as the one that has that Axle API access. And I would move it down to the selected application users. Once this is done, the next thing you would need to do is then checkmark enable end user PIN synchronization. Okay. Then you click save. Now, if you do get errors, sometimes you do get errors here. If you haven't ever done this before, if you click that, sometimes you could get some errors like, I don't know, you might get like a certificate error, right? That your certificate has not been successfully exchanged. That may require you to do that certificate exchange and then reboot the two systems, right? The second issue that you may get is kind of like an HTTPS error. If you get an HTTPS error, it just simply means that this user didn't have access to that Axle API access, okay? So those are the kind of like the two errors that you're looking for. But if that is correct, then let's go ahead and see if we can change our pins. And the way that we can check this to see if PIN synchronization is working between CallManager and Unity Connection, I'm going to go to Unity Connection. And I'm going to test this by looking at some authentication rules. So I know it's here somewhere. Hold on. Oh, here we go, authentication rules. If I go to my PIN settings, which in this particular case, the default PIN settings would be the voicemail authentication rule here. If you take a look at these PIN settings, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, well, let's make sure that the minimum credential length is at least 6. And you know what? Let's make sure to check for trivial passwords so that, you know, I couldn't put in like a 1111, or I couldn't put in like a 2000, I couldn't put in my directory number, or I couldn't like spell out my last name or something, right? So it's got to be a strong PIN. So I want to be able to do this so that you guys can see the messaging that happens between CallManager and Unity Connection. So now I have to put a minimum PIN of 6 digits, and it cannot be a trivial password. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to CallManager. I'm going to try to change the PIN settings within my end users here. And if you can take a look at my Benjamin Wynn account, I'm going to go ahead and change this person's PIN. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to actually make this a trivial password. So I'm going to put 1111. And for the confirmation PIN, I'm also going to put 1111. You know that that's not going to work. Because again, my authentication rule here says that the minimum credential length has to be 6, and it cannot be a trivial password. But let's see what happens when I try to save this configuration. You guys see that message up top? Notice it. It tells you, hey, you can't update this PIN because you've turned on PIN synchronization between CallManager and Unity Connection. And the authentication for Unity Connection does not allow for this PIN to work. So let's go back to Unity Connection. Let's change this to 4. And let's actually uncheck for trivial passwords. And then now that you've updated the authentication rule, let's go back to the end user and try to change this to a trivial password. Again, I'll type in 1111 and I'll confirm it. And this time, because of the authentication rules that Unity Connection will allow, it should allow me to save this configuration. You see that? And now it's as if you know now that like if I go up to this Benjamin Wynn account, that person does have a PIN set for 1111. You might not be able to see their current PIN, but just by changing the PIN and seeing whether or not that allows a system to kind of make those changes, you know that the PIN was successfully synced between these two systems. Okay. And yeah, that's kind of the idea between the PIN synchronization, folks. It's pretty easy. The only kind of gotchas here would be that you have to kind of exchange these certificates between these two systems. And then you'd have to kind of go in and make sure that your application user has that API access for that Axel, for that role, right? For the standard Axel API access here, okay? Once that's done, again, it's just 2 different check marks. Those 2 check marks are in Cisco Unity Connection. We'll go down to phone system. We'll go down to the Axel servers. And then for your Axel servers, you are going to check mark that enable PIN synchronization on Unity. And then in CallManager, you're going to go to system. And then you can go down to application server. And then the application server that you have here, just make sure that this is enabled for PIN synchronization. And again, make sure that you're referencing that CUCM admin account or whichever account that has access to that Axel, the standard Axel API access. Okay. And that's it, folks. That's it for PIN synchronization. If you guys want kind of like a lab guide of sorts on how to do this stuff, send me your email. And then after this session is finished, I will send you kind of like step-by-step instructions on what you would need to do to be able to enable this stuff. Okay? But anyway, I hope this session was useful. Let me know if you guys have any questions.
Hey, Ben.
Yes, sir.
So is this primarily with the CallManager import configuration into Unity Connection as opposed to the LDAP sync?
So if you have LDAP sync, that's okay. the idea here would be you just got to make sure, okay, that between CallManager and Unity Connection, when you are, like, let's say you're doing LDAP synchronization, that's fine if you do LDAP sync. You just got to make sure that the user ID here matches that user ID that is configured here in CallManager. Okay, so you could do LDAP synchronization, and you could just use this kind of Axle service for the PIN synchronization, but you just got to.
But you would still need to configure
that extension is exactly the same from both systems. Okay.
Right, but you would still need to configure the application server on CallManager, right? Because you need to enable PIN synchronization there, and you still got to enable it on the Unity Connection side, right?
That is correct. You got to enable on both sides still.
So
you're doing LDAP synchronization. You still need that Axle configuration there. Okay.
Okay. So if this was an existing deployment, it's pretty much would have to send out communication like, hey, you know, we're going to synchronize pins. You know, moving forward, start using the pin from CallManager. I guess, right?
Yep. Yeah, because traditionally, right, we're just managing pins separately from both systems, and just an easy way for us to kind of keep sync pins the same across all systems. All right. So, but yeah, you could, if you have an existing system with LDAP or however you integrated your people, you just got to make sure that the end user right here and that extension has to be the exact same thing when you click on CallManager. So like their user ID has to be the same here, and then that primary extension has to be the same number. If those numbers and or user IDs don't match, the PIN syncs won't work for those users. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I know. Yeah. So I think, yeah, it's going to be a little bit difficult with obviously some local accounts on Unity Connection that don't match up to CallManager. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, but yeah, that is the stipulation that I kind of saw when I was testing this stuff. If you didn't make that primary association here, then the PIN sync really just didn't work for those type of users. So.
All right. Cool. Thanks.
Right. Yeah, send me your email, and then I can send you step-by-step instructions on how to kind of configure this stuff. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
I hope that's helpful, Raphael.